All right, everybody. I think we're going to get rolling here. So I appreciate everybody jumping in on a Sunday for today's conversation. I'm very excited to have Joe Clancy from Eastern University back on to talk tonight. Coach, how you doing?
Hey, Andy, doing wonderful. How are you?
Awesome. I'm doing great, man. So appreciate the time tonight. So we're going to have a conversation here for the parents tonight. I wanted to ask Coach Joe to come on tonight to just give a little perspective from a current college coach about the parents' role in recruiting, what role you play, just kind of how to best be an advocate for your son in the recruiting process. And so Coach Joe, I think is going to bring some great insight for you tonight. So this should be a really good one. So I'm going to record it. If you feel like you missed something or want to go back over anything, I'll send it out afterwards. And just a real quick plug for our social media stuff too. Give us a follow on the NCSA baseball accounts there. We'll share some things there as well, and good place to see some content. But Coach Joe, good to go.
Yeah, all good.
All right, man. Let's get rolling here. All right. So, and if we have any late arrivers, hopefully we'll just get them caught up. But we're gonna have time for the conversation, and Coach I'm sure, will be gracious enough to answer some questions as well. So if you have questions, just fire away in the chat box. Maybe we'll get to some of them in real time if it kind of makes sense. Otherwise, we'll definitely try to get to as many as we can here before we wrap up tonight. All right, just humor me for a couple seconds here. I want to highlight some upcoming workshops as well before we dive into this. We got some really good stuff coming up here, coming into the end of February, heading into March. So you can see them listed there. Screenshot it, take a picture of this page. But just to highlight a couple of them. We've got how to shoot your skills video coming up tomorrow night, later on in March. Division III recruiting. We're gonna have to talk about that on Tuesday. So that's a really good one as well. Of course, I've got some JUCO coaches from North Carolina. Got a panel coming up first week of March that are going to join us for a conversation. I've got Tyler Chamberlain Simon, who's with the Tampa Bay Rays. He's a front office guy there, so we're gonna have a great conversation with him as well. So we got some good conversations coming up. And then another one for parents. I try to run a monthly parents workshop. We're going to talk in March about navigating the cost of recruiting. I know that's another big one topic for you as parents. So that's one I have coming up in March. So definitely join that one as well. But you can see some others. Get signed up. If you can't make them live, you always get those recordings. All right, but let's do some quick intros real quick here, Coach, and then we'll dive into it. I know I'm not the main person here, so let me do a quick intro just on myself, and then I want to give you a chance here, Coach, to just give a little baseball background on your experience in baseball. But for anyone who hasn't been in my workshops here, Andy Drake, Senior Group Recruiting Coach, been here at NCSA for over 11 years now. I am a former college coach, been a head coach, recruiting coordinator, head coach at Cairn University for 1 year back in the day, recruiting coordinator at Kalamazoo College here in Michigan, played at Calvin University up in Michigan, and I was a high school teacher, coach, AD for about a decade before I got into the college stuff. So hopefully be a good host here tonight. But Coach Joe, just a quick background on kind of how you got to Eastern and kind of your current role there at Eastern right now.
Yeah, so hey everybody. Obviously, as Andy said, my name is Joe Clancy. I am going on year 8 of coaching collegiate baseball, so it's kind of hard to believe already.
Goes fast.
But my official title, I'm an assistant coach and overall the recruiting coordinator for the Eastern University baseball program. We're a Division III baseball program right outside of Philadelphia. Throughout my collegiate career, I've kind of filled all roles. I've been a volunteer assistant, graduate assistant. I've been a head coach at the collegiate level at the University of Valley Forge in Phoenixville, PA, and I'm lucky enough to be back at Eastern, which is my alma mater. So this has kind of been a whirlwind of an 8 years, but very similar to Andy. Lucky to be where I am today. So I've been fortunate enough to help. I consider it help and guide over 200 families for the programs that I've coached at. Certainly, I've talked to many, many more throughout this process. So have definitely got my feet wet in terms of the recruiting side, and it's honestly the side of things that I love the most. I know a lot of times it could be viewed as another sales position, but for me, I try to teach as best as I can. And through that process, it's definitely teaching players, families about this whole process because I certainly did not know what I was getting into when I started playing college baseball. So, I just try to be a little bit more of a guiding light throughout my process here. So, if you have questions about my experience, let me know, but I'll kind of leave it at that for now.
Awesome, great stuff. And so, Coach, I know you're going to be with your experience and background at multiple programs, different roles as a coach in recruiting, from head coach on down. I've had a ton of conversations with parents as well, and so I know that this is going to be a very helpful conversation. All right, so let's get into this. So, Coach, I'm going to just throw a few topics up that I just want to sort of get your thoughts on as we go through this. going to probably lead into some other, avenues of conversation here tonight. But we talk a lot with our parents about different things. So I want to just kind of allow you to provide some perspective for them as a current college coach here. So I think it's really important. We talk a lot about, hey, it's important for the kids to be driving the process, right? Like it's the kids' process. It's their, sort of journey that is, kind of that we're on here. Of course, as parents, we're part of this process. But just from your perspective as a college coach, interacting with families and recruiting, why is it so important for the parents to be able to kind of allow their kid to sort of drive the process and kind of where they're going with it?
Yeah, I think very simply, and I know we go through this process with families, so it may seem like I'm jumping the fence here, but I just want to try and keep it as simple as always. We are recruiting your son at the end of the day. You guys as family members are going to be involved. You're involved in the recruiting process. You're certainly involved in the support process throughout the entire 4 years of collegiate baseball. But we are ultimately around your son. We get to know your son very, very well, and they have to get to know us. I'm going to probably reiterate that in many, many different ways, hopefully throughout this Zoom and throughout the process. But we're around them almost 24/7 outside of when we all sleep. Certainly in the spring on our road trips, everything like that. So I think that's just the simplest way I can put it. To let your kid drive the process, just because again, we have to get to know them. We might love you as parents. I've been on many, many recruiting visits, many, many tours where parents are awesome. And unfortunately, the son doesn't say a word, and that's okay. Some kids might be shy, and we can dive into anything like that. But ultimately, we have to be able to, even as individual human beings, be able to coincide with one another. So if we're not able to do that, we're really not going to know, who your kid is. So that's what I would just simplify it as. We just have to know who they are first and foremost.
You brought up a scenario that, of course, I think all college coaches, kind of have that scenario where it's like, man, the parents are great, seem really into it, but it's like the kid, man, the kid just didn't seem like he really was into it. Like, I don't know, does he like us? Does he not? So what would be some advice for the parents in here if it kind of seemed, if maybe the parents recognize like, yeah, maybe my guy does kind of come off a little bit that way, perhaps in some of these interactions. What would be your advice for the parents to maybe behind the scenes in the background kind of to encourage them to say, hey man, you got to maybe be, step up a little bit more, do a little bit more. What would be some advice for the parents to be able to kind of talk to them about that?
Yeah, I think one of the easiest methods that I've seen is just have some, pre-discussed questions.
Mm-hmm.
Something that they can handle. Even if they are a shy kid. I am telling you, I was a shy kid. I got in trouble for high school because in classes I didn't speak at all. So there are many, many ways that you can go about this, but I would just say if they're not comfortable communicating, learning how to do that, or just giving them some sort of platform to be able to do that. Because yes, a lot of this process will be over text, email, video exchange, but at some point you're going to be face to face. So just even some sort of prep or thought, even as to how we go about this, and I think if I can, give anybody just some relief here, we've all been through this process ourselves. As I said, I was a shy kid going through high school and certainly college. Heck, I'm nervous talking to you all right now, but it's just one of those things that, as you go, you will get more comfortable, just like everything we do in baseball. So if they're not used to communicating, I would say that's just going to be the biggest thing, to just give them a little bit of a platform so they can build and grow from there, certainly. But also, maybe get to the heart at, is this program a fit for me? And there's going to be many, many ways to go about that. That's why I certainly know NCSA exists, but I think there's a lot of ways that you can just start small and let it grow from there.
I love that advice about kind of planning ahead of time. Like let's plan a little bit, provide that opportunity where here, this is where we're going to want you to kind of, when we're on this visit or when we're talking to the coach, like to kind of step up. One other thing on this topic here before we go into our next one, sometimes you do find, I'm sure a lot, where it does feel like too, hey, it seems like maybe the parent maybe wants a little more, right? Like maybe it seems like whether it's in interactions or, conversations or whatever, like maybe it just seems, it kind of get this feeling of like, man, I feel like mom and dad kind of maybe want this a little more than, maybe the kid does. Again, like as a parent, how can you kind of maybe just kind of talk to parents a little bit about just sort of that sort of dynamic and making sure that it is the kid, the recruit, the player that you're recruiting that is demonstrating they want to potentially be there, not just mom and dad. And how does that maybe be a little bit of a red flag for you too as a coach if you're kind of sensing like, man, I don't know if the kid wants it as much as the parents here do.
Yeah, and I think the best way I can put it is for a coach that's done this long enough, we're gonna know whatever facade players or parents are putting
Mm-hmm.
on. We're gonna read right through that. It's really not hard to do. So I would just say be as genuine as you can be. That's certainly how my process kind of goes. I'm gonna give it to you straight. I love Eastern University. It's where I went, but it's not a fit for everybody. And I think if you can understand from a parent standpoint that we're going to be as genuine as we can about this whole process and what lies after kind of
Mm-hmm.
commitment day. I think that's just kind of the biggest thing is also helping your son realize what is he getting into.
Mm-hmm.
Because you may not know either. And again, there's some questions right there you can ask every single coach. So I think there's just got to be just a reality check in the sense of you have to know what you're getting into and the
Mm-hmm.
commitment. The desire is great. There's a lot of kids out there that have the desire. They're going to show it obviously in different ways. We know that as well. But I think if there's just any way that we can just maintain the genuine
Mm-hmm.
conversation, genuine desire, you're gonna know right away if it's right for your son or not. And so are we throughout this process. That's just kind of the best way that I can kind of, put that into words.
Yeah, no doubt. Like let them drive it. Let them be the front. And I always thought this analogy, coach, when I was always talking about like when I was on a visit, like when I would always talk to parents before and kind of the picture, like try to think when you're on that visit, the picture of your son is walking next to the coach as you're walking down the campus, and then you're like a step back as mom and dad. You're part of it, but don't be the ones walking next to coach and your kid dragging behind, right? Your kid should be the one in front and you're kind of behind support. And that was kind of an analogy I was kind of thought as well. So another thing I'm sure you run into a lot, coach, is how parents, sort of assess their son's ability in baseball, right? And so, why is it important as a parent, from the college coach's perspective, to sort of project that we have a realistic sense of like how strong of a player our son is, and so forth. Like, why is that important? Like, what does that kind of play into kind of how you evaluate sort of the overall dynamic of who this, this family unit is that you're speaking with in the process?
Yeah, and again, I think it comes down to communication, but
Mm-hmm.
also if you haven't gotten out to a college baseball game, please do so.
Mm-hmm.
Please, turn it on whatever live stream you have. If you have ESPN Plus, tune in. College baseball has started already, and it's a great thing. Just because I'm very brutally honest when I say this to any recruit, any family. I would not have recruited myself, if I'm in the same position, or going back to being a player. I was about a 78 mile an hour arm coming out of high school. I thought I was a two-way. I was a little bit out of shape. I wasn't ready and prepped in a lot of ways for college baseball. But like myself, I thought I was ready for it. Kind of gun ho about it. But why I say that is just because the game has changed. It's changed tremendously. Even to teammates of mine that I played with and graduated with, I have to explain like, hey, we're not the same program. We're a lot better. 10 years ago, Andy, I'm sure you can speak this too. Probably the most outstanding conference arm that you had was like 84 miles an hour. Well, now that's our average bullpen arm.
Mm-hmm.
We have guys, hard to believe, that are topping 90 to 92. So I think there's just got to be an understanding of what college baseball is today. And I have to say, like anything that comes out of my mouth today, February 16th, 2025, it is what it is today. College baseball has gone through a lot of changes, certainly over 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
But heck, with all the rules changes and everything that's kind of coming down, there is a new system now. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just so different. So, just be aware that I'm not trying to lead anybody in the wrong direction, trying to give you what, hopefully is going to remain true. But we've just seen a lot of changes on our side. So I think just getting acclimated to college baseball, what it looks like, what the levels are like, because I know it's just one of those things. A lot of families might be told this by travel coaches, organizations, certainly NCSA. I mean, there's a lot of Division III teams that will go out and beat Division I teams, and I think that's only getting more and more true as the levels of baseball across colleges, Division I, II, III, JUCO, NAIA, USCAA, whatever designation that a school is, it's just getting a lot better in terms of the pure baseball talent. So, you have to be, in a sense, realistic. And I can't tell you how many times I was told this as a player and as certainly as a high school student. But I think it's only going to be beneficial for families to just be aware of what level
Yeah.
of play is at, each level of college baseball. Not to say that there's not a place for everybody. I think there still is,
Mhm.
but you just have to be aware of, where you're actually looking. So that's just kind of a play on words, I think, a little bit. I never like the term be realistic.
Mhm.
A lot of ways we are unrealistic in this process. You have to be unrealistic to be a college baseball player in the first place, with all that you go through. So, it's just one of those things. Just be aware again of potential
Yeah.
what you could get into.
How strong programs are. Like guys are older and guys are sticking around longer than they ever have in college baseball. And so and all that trickles down to programs like yourselves, right? Like you said, some of the guys that you have, 10 years ago maybe might not have landed at Eastern because there would have been some more roster spots potentially up for the guys coming out of high school. So, it all trickles down with how things are going. And so as a parent, if you have a perspective of like, hey, this 25 years ago, the guys that were this good went to these schools, it may not be the case today. So, again, and let me ask you this, coach. So maybe you're talking to a kid, right? And you get the sense like the kid seems pretty realistic. Like he seems like, yeah, seems like he's pretty open to our level. Seems like he thinks this could be a good fit for him. But maybe you just sort of in the background or even a little bit up front, like get the sense that maybe a parent of that kid is sort of like, I think he might be better than, this program, whatever. Is that ever a red flag for you? Are you less concerned about that? Is it more about like, hey, does the kid think it's a fit, or does that give you pause for some concern? Some concern.
I will say anymore, always.
Yeah.
And because I think a lot of times, not just players, but especially families, they may have gone through a couple visits. They may have gone through a good, well-versed education on this process. And a lot of times we're communicated to what they think we want to hear.
Mm,
And it's a struggle a lot of times too, because as an example, Division III, we don't offer athletic scholarships. A lot of times, the student athlete will tell us, I'm concerned about my financials. Well, then a week later, they commit to a Division II school that's more expensive than us. So there's just a lot of ways that I think, again, there's a lot of families that will communicate to us what they think we want to hear.
mhm,
That is a very, very big red flag because it's like, well,
mhm,
again, you're
mhm,
not being honest. We're always upfront with all of our recruits. We say, hey, we're going to give it to you straight. All we ask for in return is that as well.
mhm.
So if there's just any of that, yeah, it's just a big, big red flag.
Yeah, yeah, communicating well, and we'll get into some more of that too, of course. Now, academics is obviously very important. You talk about, at certain programs like yourselves, like maybe there isn't the athletic scholarship piece. And so, a lot of times that's part of like, just getting as much money for school as you can is obviously academics and so forth. But, how important is it as a parent for you as a college coach to hear whether it's in your interactions with the family that, hey, it seems like mom and dad are definitely on board with the academics, right? Like why is that important for you to hear that as far as like, hey, we feel more comfortable with this being a potentially good fit?
Yeah, I think from a very basic standpoint, we just have to know, are you going to be successful at the college
Hmm.
level?
Hmm.
And there is, really no secret that, especially at the Division III level, and I would argue at any level of college baseball, the guys that are the most successful in the classroom ultimately are the same guys that are successful on the baseball field. I really do think that goes hand in hand. So it just helps tell a story about, your player that you're talking about. So yes, we want to make sure, obviously, they're admissible to the school. We want to make sure that they're going to receive the best academic package that they can get. But I think on top of that, it's what are we getting in
Hmm.
this individual? So, as I kind of mentioned before, we need to get to know your son as well as possible. Well, this side of things really helps tell the story. And then on the back end, once a student athlete is in our program, then we're able to know, okay, well, what do we need to focus on? Are they going to need help with academics? Do we need to set them up? Maybe they're in a tougher major too. It doesn't
Hmm.
necessarily
Hmm.
mean that they're a good or bad student, but there are some harder classes. We have engineering, and it's one of those things that those classes are very hard. I would never sign up for any of those courses, but it's just one of those things that there are going to be challenges throughout their academic career, and that's still, I think, a part of the college experience that is different from high school, but it's just going to help tell us the story that should we invest the time, the effort in someone that can actually make it worth it on the back end too. So that's why I would think that there's, really that focus on academics, again, no matter where you are. And there's a lot of different situations for every single level. From a very basic standpoint, if we're talking about a school with money as well, every GPA point equals a dollar amount. Don't know what that exactly is going to be, but if you're talking about anything outside of a Division III school, or any other schools or levels that don't offer athletic money, I promise you there is going to be a dollar amount equated to your GPA.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Now, how important is it for you to have a sense of, what that kid may want to study coming into your school, right? Or and maybe as the family kind of talks about, well, this is what he's thinking, or he's not sure what he wants to study. How do you kind of handle those conversations, and how do you kind of reassure the parents that, hey, this could be a good fit, or what kind of questions do you kind of present to them to kind of dig a little bit deeper about whether your school, Eastern, may be a fit for them? Just for example, as a college coach, how do you kind of sort of figure that out? If they kind of come in like, well, we don't really know what he wants to study, or he isn't sure yet, how do you kind of, with the parents, reassure them like, well, this could be a good fit, or here's what we offer at our school?
Yeah, yeah, and I think going beyond the simple of,
Mm-hmm.
we have your major.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I always like to ask of what do you want to do down the road?
Mm-hmm.
Say baseball's done, say you had your 15-year major league career. What do you want to do with your life? I think that can often help guide, even to what major you might want to study if you're undecided,
Mm-hmm.
because that's certainly a strong decision in itself. But outside of that, there's a lot of examples, I think, where a lot of tracks, certainly families too, can think that it's A to B. One that I've learned over the years has just been if you want to get into law. There's a lot more tracks that you can study as opposed to pre-law or
Mm-hmm.
anything in terms of like economics or anything like that. There's a lot more that you might think. One example is I was shown this by a professor at Valley Forge that you can be an English major because a big part of law is you're going to be writing a lot. So there's just so many different ways I think to get to your end goal.
Mm-hmm.
Now there are some majors too. Again, engineering, probably some of your more sciences are going to be A to B, but there are some different tracks that you can get on if you're looking at anything in terms of the health sciences. You don't have to be a pre-med major. You can go into exercise science. You can go into
Mm-hmm.
biology even. There's just so many different ways that you can go about things that, again, maybe just parents as well that have gone to college, maybe know, general areas of what to study or how to set yourself up for success. That may just have changed, even by name, by nature, just, what you want to do. As a quick example, I know this was a big deal a couple years ago. A lot of the sciences in terms of like the health sciences, athletic training, physical therapy at a lot of schools, they became more of a prerequisite for some of those graduate opportunities. So now Eastern certainly one of them. We have a 4-year degree that's set up to get you to, either med school or graduate school for physical therapy or something along those lines. So again, there's just a lot of ways that you can get there. So there's just I would just say always ask questions. Figure out, are these the classes that I want to study? Are they the classes that I want to take? And really what each major is actually entailing. And I will tell you too, you're not always going to know that from a website description. A lot of them, the language is very, very similar, but you might be studying two completely different things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just
Yep.
one of those things that ask away for sure.
And as parents, have these conversations, right, to understand, behind the scenes as you're interacting with coaches, find out after you have conversations, hey, what does this look like? What do you think? Let's do some of that research. So very important. Academics is going to be very important, and I think every college coach is going to tell you. Anybody like Coach Joe is going to tell you, hey, if you don't see yourself as a fit here without baseball, maybe it's a place that you maybe it's not as good of a fit, right? I mean, and maybe that's not always the best selling point for a coach, but you got to be able to see yourself there without baseball too. I think that's also something to look at. If there's any questions, fire away in the chat box. All right, Coach, we have a lot of parents, especially fathers, potentially, as we're looking at baseball. Not saying that there aren't any, female coaches out there. Of course, there are some, even at the college level. But a lot of dads out there that maybe are the high school coach or have coached in travel ball or have done a lot of coaching, and then maybe some of them are a little more informal, right? Is like maybe just very enthusiastically, coaching from the stands and helping out, as they grow up, as players. How, as a coach, do you view, sort of the parent in the role of sort of helping, these players coming up, and why is it important maybe as a parent to start to, as they get older and older, be able to kind of maybe even step back a little bit, and then kind of looking at all of those scenarios of like, what are maybe some red flags of like, interactions with parents? They'd be like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm going to want that dad on our sideline or whatever it may be. How are some examples of this as far as like parents kind of being able to step back and allow other folks to kind of coach up their sons?
Yeah, I think it goes right back to what we started out with. It's letting your kid drive the process.
Mm,
I think if you're over coaching, they're not learning. And ultimately, what that scenario entails is you're also putting pressure on them, in a lot of ways. And we've all seen the good and bad parents.
mm,
I'm sure we can think of endless examples, but I think it's just one of those things that, if you're able to play free, that's when you're going to be at your best. And we talk about that all the time, because again, there's a lot of stressors in a college baseball player's life. Certainly, again, I think for a lot of our, I'll say like higher academic majors, we have to get our engineering students to stop thinking math equations and think baseball. There are those switches that are realistic. So it's just one of those things that, don't create an environment that's full of pressure. There's always going to be enough pressure, and I promise you, there will be a difference when you see, your kid play in a stress-free environment versus one that's, stressful. Now, I will say that's also very, very different, and I want to make this clear. A competitive environment is very, very different from a stress-filled environment.
mm,
A stress-filled environment, in the grand scheme of things, is very, very negative. A competitive atmosphere, yes, there's going to be stressors, but they're not necessarily negative. There's a lot more, of the dramatics involved, and that's kind of what every game that we play is. But I just want to make sure that that's very, very clear, because I'm not saying that, you don't want your son to experience pressure. And I think that's a lot of today, what we still tend to get out of high school baseball at a very good program. But we're playing those types of games every single day, almost every single
mm,
weekend. Maybe not every midweek game for sure, but certainly on the weekends, when you're trying to win a 3 to 4 baseball game, that's competitive. So, again, that just tells, a little bit, on the back end what it looks like. But I would also say the overcoaching, you put it simply, Andy, just kind of saying like, hey, we don't want that on our sideline either. Well, also on the back end, we don't want that to go on behind closed doors, because that's something that, if we know that you're overcoaching in the travel environment, the high school environment, well, that's not going to stop. Just because you may say it's like, oh yeah, my son's going to be listening to you and being coached by you, that's not necessarily going to stop. You're their parent, and we know that. That's not a bond we're trying to break. We're trying to
mm,
build them
mm.
up just like you are. But at the end of the day, when we're coaching them, this is one of those processes too that I try to tell every family this, and every student athlete, like, you're entrusting me and our coaching staff to get you better. And if you don't think that we can do that, we're not the fit for you.
Right,
That's
right.
just as simple as I can put it.
Yeah. We had a scenario one time where, it was like freshman year. It was, we had some games before spring break, right? Then spring break was coming up, and then we are going to be going back. We had a guy who had a couple of struggles freshman year, pre spring break. And he told us literally, hey, coach, I'm going to go home over spring break and I'm going to go work with my hitting coach and I'm going to try to straighten some things out. And to us, it's like, eh, what about all the work we're doing here? So again, there's a fine line there, right? Of, going where you're comfortable, but also buying into the program that you're at. And if you, and coach, you just said it perfectly. If you don't feel like, before you get there, like, hey, we're going to really allow our son to buy in, maybe it's not the right fit. You've got to kind of be able to do that before you release them too. I think that's great advice, a great way to look at it. So awesome. All right. A question came in. I know some questions will pop in. I actually have a slide that we're going to get to a little bit about some of that. So we'll come back to that one. That's a great question. All right, coach, you touched it. And this one I don't want to spend a ton of time on, but, just what would be some advice for the parents as far as like the importance of sort of travel ball? A lot of parents have the question of like, man, we feel like we got to really invest and, get them on the best travel team and we got to go all over the place and do all the things. as a college coach, what would be some advice for the parents of just kind of like how to, use travel ball and their non-school ball essentially, how they can use that wisely, and how important really is it for them to do all of the big things as opposed to just do the right things for you to be able to evaluate them?
Yeah, I think travel ball, it's become a beast, and it is something where we get to see your student athlete pretty much in person. So the best way that I can, just offer advice in terms of travel ball, don't make it, about purely a financial decision,
Mm-hmm.
because that's going to be probably how you act in terms of the college realm as well. You want your exposure, utilize your time wisely for sure. But I think travel ball, again, offers us just the best platform, for us to get out and see your son play over the summer. Certainly, we're invited to a ton of events, but I think it just goes beyond, a little bit of, am I getting exposure? You're probably getting exposure in some way, shape, or form, but I would say try and think of it, again, is it the best fit for me? Is this travel ball team organization going to the events that, you want the right exposure to?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's just a big thing. It's just not about even playing time. I promise you, if you're playing travel ball, you're probably getting an adequate amount of playing time. But again, I just think you have to use your resources wisely, and just make sure you're going to the right places, because you might think that you're on the best travel team. I promise you, there's travel ball, again, in terms of the competitive environment, it's not going to be as useful as your high school. Now, again, competitive environment, but some are very, very good with development. I have a lot of good friends across travel ball. Again, you have to use your resources wisely. If
Mm-hmm.
that travel organization is developing the best pitchers, yeah, you might want to get in their door. Same thing. Again, if you're looking to get in front of us, we might be, kind of huddled in the Northeast,
Yeah.
throughout the summer, or on the East Coast. It's just one of those things. Now we have players from across the country, but we might not be able to see them unless we know where their travel ball team is. So there's just a lot of ways that this can kind of shake out and break down. But I would just say, always be aware of, what the travel organization, is going to be ultimately known for, and especially
Yeah.
known for in your process. But I don't think it's something where you have to, try and even guest play every weekend, or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. You have to ultimately use your resources wisely, and spend your energy wisely too,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's not something where you need to travel 8 hours every single weekend just to
Mm-hmm.
play. Outside of travel ball, we still have camps. Every college program is going to have their own camp, and you need to get on campus. That's a great way to do it. So don't always think that, oh, I missed my opportunity to get in front of coach X, Y, or Z. There's always going to be those exposure events, even
Yeah.
outside of travel ball.
Yeah, finding a good balance of, what makes sense. And for some families, it may be a little bit more doable to do some of the extra stuff. If you are in a position where it's like, we have to make some decisions, if you do your local stuff, play on your local Legion team, pick the right strategic camp or two to go to at a fraction of the cost of some of like the quote unquote national travel teams, you're probably getting just as much or a very similar amount of bang for your buck for than the big travel teams, certainly. So and like I said, next month we're going to talk about we'll get into it more about some of the cost of navigating recruiting because there are a lot of things to get into about that. All right, coach. So we touched on a little bit earlier, but as far as like finances around like being able to afford college, right? Sometimes, and I coached at the D3 level. You're at the D3 level currently. Like sometimes that's a big thing, right? You reach out to a family and you might almost get that instant knee jerk reaction of like, coach, no way we could go there. No scholarships. You get that kind of, sometimes sort of that perspective or perception of it. How do you, as a parent, sort of, be honest about kind of what makes sense for the family and have those honest conversations with the coach? This might be more of like the parent to the coach conversation, right? This sometimes is not so much the kid like relaying about the finances. This is probably parent to coach conversation more than anything. So how do you kind of handle that and how do you recommend as a coach the parents kind of handle these conversations with you?
Yeah, and I'm brutally honest. I usually say to the son, "Hey, I know you're not writing the check for college. So let me talk to who is about this side."
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
But Really, for finances, again, this is just something where you just have to kind of face the realities of it. And we are thankfully, I think, getting more and more of this where kids are being a little bit more upfront is I can't afford it. And that's totally okay. But I will say there are a lot of ways to think about this, approach this. College in general is an investment, especially the college baseball side. You're investing to hopefully play another day, another 4 years, hopefully, and potentially beyond. But you're
Right.
also investing in yourself, in your potential career. So I don't want necessarily parents to think that, hey, it's just writing a check, and it's very transactional. You are investing in your future a little bit. So I just don't want parents to forget that. Again, I know the realities of it. I'm in the stage of life where I'm in my 30s. I have a house, I have a dog. My wife, is very, very happy, with those things, and I get some of those realities. So I'm not a parent, but I understand the realities that you're going through.
Mhm.
And I think it's just one of those things that you have to just keep the big picture in mind, because there are a lot of realities on the back end too that
Mhm.
I try to let families know all the time. At a school like Eastern, if you're a good student and you're doing all the things that you need to do, applying for the scholarships, you're probably going to end up at the end of the day cheaper, or I should say more affordable in a lot of ways to schools like ours, or across the board, than you would if you got an athletic scholarship. This is not a knock on where my feet have been, but the first college that I went to out of high school, everybody was a scholarship player. It's great.
Mhm.
Now, I will say I'm not going to say which college this was. It may or may not still be the same, but the athletic scholarships were $200. So that doesn't do very much. So I don't want parents to necessarily be afraid of the sticker shock. Yes, college is very expensive, but on the back end, you might actually be in a situation where it's way more affordable than you think. And there's definitely ways to go about that. We
Yeah.
make sure that families know to talk to their admissions counselors, make sure they apply for every scholarship that's possible. Just don't think that it's necessarily out of your budget, until you actually go through the process. And a big thing that I want families to know too is the FAFSA process was just changed this past year. Um, I know it's been in the process for the last 2 years, but
Mhm.
the government is now coming along and saying like, okay, we're going to reevaluate how pretty much we look at a student's finances. It's not just going to be, hey, what we think you should pay every year. Now we're really going to look at, hey, what are you actually going to be able to afford every year? So there are some positive changes in that. You're going to have help no matter what.
Mhm.
I think it's at any college now, almost 99% of students are going to be on some sort of aid.
Yeah.
And that's not a negative. It's just something that you qualify for. Take the money,
Yep.
wherever you can get it. So that's just something that, again, it may be sticker shock at first. A lot of coaches I hear say all the time, you're going to be paying over the 4 years, what you might pay for a house. Having recently bought a house, I'd say the house is still a little bit more, but again, you're just investing in your future at that point.
Mhm.
And I don't want you to think that, hey, that is actually going to be the final cost. There's a lot of ways to work on that.
Well, and you've been at multiple schools, and so I think you could probably say this from all of the experience at different schools you've been at. The colleges want to make it work, right? If a kid is a good fit and they have extended an admission to you, and you're being recruited by one of the athletic teams, like they want to make it work. So don't shy away from them as a parent having these conversations, whether it's with the coaches or even just directly with the financial aid departments. Like those colleges, they want to try to find every dollar they can for you. They're not trying to hide it from you, right? So I'm sure in your experience, you can kind of say that you've experienced that as well, right, Coach?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
one quick thing I'll add to that too, and I think nowadays we are experiencing colleges closing.
yeah,
There
yep,
was five in our region last year that offered baseball that we have competed against in the past that are
hmm,
closed now, and
yep, yep,
some more are closing. So don't also think that whatever your final financial aid letter says is going to be the final price. I promise you, this is a big thing that I tell families too. The college process in terms of the finances is also like buying a house. You're
Mhm.
going to have your representatives on your side, the coach, your admissions counselor. We're all going up against financial aid. As long as you're communicating to us, we're going to help you through that battle.
Yeah.
We're not always going to win it, but for sure, you're going to know that, hey, we're doing everything we can. We're going
Yep.
to try and knock that final cost down as much as possible. So,
Yeah.
again, that's not just an Eastern thing. That's a big thing that a lot of colleges will never say. And I'm, checking if my house is bugged right now, but we do want you to know that
Yep.
you
Yep.
have opportunities to get that final cost down too.
Absolutely, absolutely. So keep the conversation going. Awesome. All right. So, Coach, we touched on communication a little bit. Just some general advice for the parents here who maybe they're just helping their son navigate sending out some emails, or maybe trying to get on the phone with you for the first time, or how you utilize social media and maybe try to encourage like some of those kind of interactions, like just some general advice for how the parents can encourage strong communication with their sons, with you as coaches throughout the process.
Yeah, I think always kind of formulating, a good email with just all
Mm-hmm.
the necessary information. A link to video is going to be the biggest thing. That's what I'm scanning through and looking for, because ultimately, me personally, that's what I want to see.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not solely recruiting off of video, but I need to see, hey, are you at least, what we're looking for in terms of the
Mm-hmm.
baseball side? Then I'm going to need to check, GPA. But I always love to see this. I don't see this a lot. What are you looking to study? I need to know
Mm-hmm.
off the bat, are we an academic fit as well? Really then, hey, where are you from? Where are you playing? I don't necessarily need to see stats. They're important. I'm not going to say that they're not, coming from a competitive environment, but I know how they are inflated. I think
Mm-hmm.
every college coach today knows how good or bad a high school league is. I know how good or bad a tournament might be. Yes, we want you to be successful, but at the same time, you have to be able to promote that in the right way. Again, that's why video comes first. I'm going to be able to know. For the most part, I'm not a fortune teller, but I can tell if you're going to be able to hit in college just by looking at a video.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's just a lot of ways that you just need to kind of promote those things that we're automatically going to be looking for.
Yep. Yep.
And I would say don't include a lot of the fluff. Don't include the things like, hey, I've been playing baseball since I was 5. Yeah, I know. A lot of us have. So there's just a lot of things that, yes, we will get to know you as a person, but make sure that that pertinent information is blasted to us, in that first initial email.
Yep.
And then we'll get to know, like I said, kind of the individual. So I would say that's just the kind of general thing for the email side. And there's not really a trick to make an email stand out one way versus
Mm-hmm.
another.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of, recently student athletes have been, putting a lot in the subject line. Yes, that helps. I would say, at least right now, timeline is very, very important. We're shifting our focus to 2026s. So for us, it's, hey, who's a 26? Who can we identify right now? And then, where are we going to be able to see them in the summer?
Mm-hmm.
So, having at least, again, that pertinent information in the subject line, that helps a ton. Probably, grad year, position, name, obviously, in the subject line, and then, let us figure out, are you potentially a fit for us, in that bulk of the email.
Yep. Yep.
Um, so that would just be the couple things that I highlight.
Cool.
And obviously where video is too. YouTube's always great, Twitter's great, or X, whatever you want to call it these days. But try to avoid the Instagram Reels videos. Try to avoid the TikTok videos. I promise you, I've seen everything and anything. It's just ease of access.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
just kind of the big thing. Make it accessible, but also make it so that, again, unlike, an Instagram reel that's just going to be on repeat and loop, I need to be able to stop the video at times too. So that's why I
Mm-hmm.
always recommend like a Twitter video or a YouTube video, mostly because that can happen on those platforms. So just make sure that, again, it's not only
Yep.
accessible, but, be able to be watched
Yep.
very closely. So again, outside of that, emails. I'm very big on texting. Again, I'm not that old, so texting is a big way that I'm able to communicate directly with a student athlete or even a parent too. I'm very open that, throughout the process, anyone can reach out to me. And I appreciate that too. Because again, I know that, while I'm being genuine, if I'm texted back, I know that, hey, there's not only genuine interest, but there's genuine care to go through the process.
Mm,
And I will say this too, there's a lot of times I get ghosted. There's just a ton of those. And it's funny that, after ghosting me for like a month, I get a text from a random number I don't recognize. Hey, coach, I'm now interested in Eastern University. I'm sorry, we're not interested at that point.
mm,
So just understanding like timing is going to be
yeah,
a very big thing, not only in terms of your response rate, but also just the time of the year too.
yep,
A big thing for us right now, I'm not able to respond as quickly as I can during the summer. We're practicing, and I'm sure as Andy knows, being in the Northeast or a northern school, we're practicing for a bigger chunk of the day just because we're stuck inside. So we kind of have to spread things out. So I'm not able to respond as quickly. I don't think any coach is going to be able to
hmm
respond as
hmm
quickly. So timing throughout the year on a big scale too. We're definitely plowing through emails over the summer. Probably in the fall as well. But if you're reaching out now, it's, don't be offended that you're not getting responded to. We're just probably at practice or traveling for a game.
yep,
So
yep.
that's just, a couple big things that I would always encourage.
Yeah. Great advice. Real quick on phone calls. Like how does it stand out if a kid like proactively calls you up? Like if you've maybe had some emails and maybe, you probably like to schedule calls, of course, but like if a kid takes an initiative to like try to call you up, is that a good thing? Is that almost always a positive thing? Like how do you kind of view the phone calls? How do you prefer those kind of happen?
Yeah, and I can't believe I skipped phone calls here, but yeah, I don't mind it. Again, any way that you reach out to us, I just know that I can count that as genuine interest.
Yep, yep.
So any format, any way of communication, any means that you want to reach out, absolutely go for it. Now, understand too, a lot of coaches might not have their personal numbers. A lot of coaches might have school provided phones, they might
Mm,
not always be looking at. You might be getting an office number. Again, might not always be listening to those voicemails. So just any way that you can potentially, again, get in real time communication with us. That's always going to be encouraged. But I promise you, at some point too, throughout the recruiting process, we're going to be on the phone.
mm,
Again, it's just one of those ways to get to know you.
yep,
Because
yep.
there's a lot of ways too that at the end of the day, if we don't have a good phone call before we get on campus, I don't know if we're going to be on campus.
Mm,
And
mm,
again, there's just a lot of those ways. So actually going back to, kind of what we discussed in the beginning, if you don't have, some of those skills or your son doesn't have some of those skills, practice it.
yep, yep.
Again, it's just one of those things. The more you practice it, the better you're going to be at it. So again,
Awesome.
I'm not perfect at this, but it took me a lot of practice for sure.
Yeah, great stuff. All right, last little bullet point here, and I know we got some questions coming in, Coach. I want to make sure to be cognizant of your time here tonight too. This has been an awesome conversation, but just real quick encouragement for the patience as a parent, from the so maybe help to help them understand like what is the typical recruiting process like, what is the length that does that look like, and as a parent how can you kind of encourage them to sort of maintain a stance of patience in the process as it's going through it or as they're going through it.
Yeah, I think certainly from the parent side, patience is going to be a big key. I promise you, you can, spin your wheels and get really tired of this process very quickly. There's a lot of parents that I talk to, especially now that they're just, relieved that the process is over and they're
Mm,
committed. So there is, the light at the end of the tunnel. But again, I just want to caution, being patient, doesn't mean necessarily to, wait to, get in contact, wait to visit a school, wait to see what the college level is like. That's not what this means. Being patient, really just means when you're in the thick of it, you're not necessarily going to get all the offers at once. You're not necessarily going
mhm,
to,
mhm.
figure out where you want to be all at once. There's, and I'm sure a lot of families go through, hey, here's my big list. Well, that's going to shrink down to one. And you just have to understand that going into this process. So I think in a lot of ways that's where you have to be patient. It's not necessarily, again, getting your feet wet in the process. So it can take time, and I'm very upfront with everybody on this that we talk to. You might not know after a visit if Eastern's the place for you. You might have to visit other schools. You might have to, go through applications. Again, if you're worried about the financial side, there's a lot of ways that I think the process now is trying to be sped up for a lot of families. But just know that not always are you going to be hurt, just by being patient. Again, if you
Hmm.
don't know by September of their senior year where they're going, that's okay.
Hmm.
Because I guarantee you, you're not the only one in that boat. You're also not the only one in that scenario where you have to wait. Again, if you're looking at financials, there's a lot of ways that, parents and families are telling us, well, hey, we're not depositing until we get that financial aid letter. Not a problem.
Yeah.
As long as you're
Yeah.
able to communicate that, we'll go through that process with you. And that's just an example of, hey, you're not going to know in September. You're going to
Hmm.
know February, March. And
Yeah.
that's just
Yeah.
kind of the natural process of college.
Yep.
And it's one of those things that you're not really going to be able to apply to colleges until after junior year and going into senior year, no matter where you're committed to. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter if you're an SEC guy or you're lower than that. So it's just a lot of ways in this process are going to be natural. So you just can't try and jump the gun. And
Yep.
Andy, you may know this stat more than I do. I know, obviously it's your job more than mine, but I know a couple years ago it was something outrageously high, like something in the 90 percentile, where kids that committed, by their freshman, sophomore year, actually didn't end up, where they committed to. So there's just a
Hmm.
lot of ways that you're going to have to be patient. Also encourage, that your child, that not everybody's commitment process is going to look the same. If
Hmm.
someone's announcing that they're going to a school, understand that's not the end all be all. And hopefully they get their time, sooner rather than later, but just know that it might take time. So
Yeah.
there's a
Yep.
lot of ways that you'll see that out there. There's a lot of ways that social media will try and influence, this process for not just you, but them, certainly. Don't be rushed by any means. You're looking to hopefully find a home, not just for a year or two, but for more, hopefully all 4 years of your college career, and that's going to take time.
Yep.
And
Yep.
we all know that.
Absolutely. Great. Great stuff. We ran the numbers here on our 25 class. My manager sent some info to us. We have only had like 12 or 13% of our 25 class report to us where they're going. Okay. So we are in February. We're still waiting on like 80% plus of our 25 class list to let us know. Now, some of those folks might be committed somewhere, but we haven't heard from them yet. But that just tells you that we're in February and the vast majority of our guys have not let us know yet where they're going. So, Coach, a few questions have come in around sort of the timeline. So I think that's a good segue. Just kind of in general, like just straight up, like where are you guys at in your 25 class? Like in general, kind of just you understanding sort of like the D3 ball and kind of like where a lot of those kind of programs at. What's it kind of looking like for 25, just from your perspective, kind of for you and just kind of in the broad picture for 25s from as a college coach?
Yeah, yeah. So for here at Eastern University, we are done with our 25 class. And in terms of we are done actively recruiting student athletes. There's a couple guys, again, that are going through the financial aid process, trying to figure out, again, if they're going to reach that deposited stage.
Mhm.
But for the most part, we know who's coming. This is actually the year we've been done the earliest. We were pretty much done in November. This process has gotten sped up on us over the last couple years. So it's just one of those things that, in terms of the timeline, it might be a little bit quicker. But again, we're not going to truly know until everybody's deposited. So there are some examples where we've had to open up a spot or two throughout the course of the year. So it just kind of happens. But for the most part, we've been actively done recruiting
Mhm.
really at the conclusion of the fall season. So
Mhm.
that's been a blessing for us, but I will tell you, not every school is in that boat.
Yep. Yep.
Especially, it doesn't matter big or small. There's transfer processes that go later into the year. There's other recruiting processes that go later into the year. So especially at a Division III standpoint, there's a lot of schools still actively recruiting. Some even are up to Division I standards they've been shut down, pretty much a year in advance. So we're in a world where we're in the wild, wild west. We don't know
Mm,
where everybody's at, but yeah, there's just a lot of ways that I think different levels are just on different timelines, and we're all kind of, creeping earlier and earlier. That's just kind of the brutal honesty to it. So that's just kind of where we stand.
yeah. Yeah, and I think that you're right. Like, there's so much happening across all levels with the transfer portal and everything else. It's really hard to know who's done, who's not, who's doing what. But the reality is, there definitely are still 25 spots, right? We are still getting roster openings from programs at a lot of levels. I would say that there are more paths than ever to get where you want to go. I know Coach Clancy might be a little hesitant to kind of speak to some of this, but a lot of guys are, even using some of the D2, D3 kind of programs to maybe go kind of prove themselves, move up. We never would have told guys that or even encouraged that at all 5 years ago. But it's a reality of how, college baseball is turning into, where if you want to get to a bigger level, maybe you don't get there as a freshman. And it's harder than ever to get into some of those bigger schools as a freshman, but there's a lot of places to go. And then you never know where your 4 years of college might take you. So, just know that there are junior colleges. There's all kinds of places to look. If you're still uncommitted, lots and lots of places still recruiting for sure. All right, coach, just an interesting question. Someone came in about kind of interpreting emails, from the coaches and, through the recruits, and, maybe sometimes like the emails, it didn't seem like there'd be much interest from the email, but perhaps maybe, the interaction maybe end up taking place. How do you kind of, just in general, how do you help interpret what's going on? Like, if a coach is emailing, how is a family going to know if you're interested from an email? Like, is it, and I'm sure the reality is there's sometimes a copy and paste sort of thing sometimes with, hey, yep, we got some camp stuff. If you guys are interested, let's gauge it and see if they get back to me kind of email. So there's always going to be like reading between the lines. What's some advice you have for just like reading between the lines in general with how to interpret emails from college coaches?
Yeah, and I know for sure through my process, I did not understand this
Yeah.
whatsoever. I was like, "Oh, great! The University of Alabama is emailing me." Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
they weren't actually. So, it's one of those things that I think from a very general standpoint, you have to read the email.
Mm-hmm.
We are operating in a traditional kind of sales environment. We're trying to get you to act on something.
Mm-hmm.
What is that action actually going to be? It's one of those things where I think if we're acting to get you to fill out a recruiting questionnaire, well, yeah, we need your information.
Mm-hmm.
And then from
Mm-hmm.
there, it can go a million different directions. But I
Yeah.
think, if you're seeing those types of emails, please fill those out because I promise you, every college program just needs your general contact
Yeah.
information, let alone your baseball information. So if you're not actively emailing college programs, you'll probably receive something along the lines of getting your information to those coaches. So, really it's just from there, then what does the email say? Does the email say, hey, contact us, let's have a conversation, as opposed to, hey, we have a winter camp coming up, a pitchers and catchers camp. So you just kind of have to actually sift through what the email will say.
Mm-hmm.
And again, there's also going to be examples where colleges are going to be under different rules. So at least for us at Division 3 level, until around like this time frame, I'm not really supposed to reach out to anybody that's not a 2025. You'll see a lot of colleges start to try and get earlier and earlier. For us at the Division 3 level, I personally think that there's kind of a time limit to that. Obviously, it's our rules, but we're trying to identify sooner and sooner. So,
Mm-hmm.
again, you just kind of have to pay attention to what is an email actually asking me to do. Again, if it's general info, yes, absolutely, because that's could only open the door for an opportunity. Again, if it's a camp, well, then again, you got to see, okay, is it worth it for me to go to that camp? Reach out to the coach again. Hey, are you still recruiting? Try and start the communication process from there. If you're not a 2025, if you're 26, 27, 28, is that a good opportunity to be identified? Does that potentially lead to roster offers? It's a big reason why we say that, over half of the kids that come to our camps actually end up at Eastern. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of ways that those can be treated very, very differently. But I think outside of that too, again, it's really what are we asking you to act on, and
Yeah.
when, most importantly too.
Yep.
You'll see
Yep.
a lot of camps, a lot of opportunities more in the fall just because we have more time, as any baseball program does. You won't see a ton in the spring. It's just kind of really that summer, fall timeline where
Yeah.
you'll have a lot of time to act on things. Whereas again, we're playing now, so there's not a ton of time to really, interact with recruits or families.
And also, are you getting personal interaction back and forth with that coach beyond just those camp emails, right? Or is that coach checking in on you, or is he only replying back when you reach out? Like, there's different ways to sort of interpret certainly that interaction. All right, coach, how do you use NCSA and other recruiting type of platforms and databases of players? How do you kind of interact? Some families are wondering sort of like what, how do you kind of you sort of interact with the platform and our database of guys?
Yeah, so I'm happy to say, certainly as an active NCSA user, it's where I start every summer,
Mm-hmm.
because I want to know. The NCSA has this magical button that we have, where it's, hey, are they interested in our school? Because a lot of students can go in and say, hey, Eastern looks like a good fit. I'm going to check off that box. Not many platforms have that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been a big thing, just to see off the bat when I'm, starting my summer and figuring out where to go, who to look at. Well, who's interested in us first? And then from there, really for then I can sift through a lot of different factors by state, by potential GPA. NCSA, especially offers a lot of other factors that we can, sort through the information by,
Mm-hmm.
which is always helpful. But that's just kind of like my first stop. Then typically from there, it's the emails. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
maybe I've followed someone on NCSA. Well, now let me check, have they emailed me?
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of verify, the interest there. And it's not just kind of a one track, kind of interest level. So really, it's just kind of verifying from there. So then, different platforms, what are we actually gaining interest from? Where do the student athletes start? Twitter's a big,
Yeah.
really resource for me. And I'm thankful to have, as many followers as I do and be able to see a ton. But, really it just kind of depends also, again, like I said, what time of the year that it is. Again, right now,
Yeah.
I'm maybe on Twitter a little bit, checking in on the NCSA emails. But again, I'm focusing on trying to help our team, make the playoffs and make a run. I'm not
Yep.
necessarily worried about, hey, who is, actively interested in us in the 26th class.
Yep.
We'll get to that, and
Yep.
certainly take my time to do that. But it's just not, like I said, the at the forefront of my mind.
Yep.
Um, so really, that's just, I would say, where a good starting point is, and then
Mm-hmm.
really from there, okay, now I've gotten interest. I know they're interested. Let me reach out, and then it becomes that personal contact from there.
Yep, yep, good stuff, good stuff. Now, Coach, a couple questions, or actually quite a few questions coming around like the showcase kind of stuff, the camp kind of stuff. You mentioned a little bit about your camps and how you guys kind of utilize your camps and tend to have some good success bringing guys in from your camps to your program. But how about like the showcase events, the PBR, the perfect game kind of stuff? How are you guys out at those events? How beneficial is that information? The database that those organizations have for verifying information. How does that all kind of play into sort of helping you identify kind of the sort of the quality of the potential recruits?
Yeah, and I think more and more this has kind of become a big thing wherever we can kind of see either progress or
Yeah.
maybe if there's a jump, that helps us, because again, not everybody's going to develop at the same rate. So if we can track your sophomore year to junior year to senior year, those platforms have been great with that. And just kind of tracking, hey, where guys are showing up at, in terms of the metrics. I will say metrics help tell a story. They're not everything. But it just, again, gives us an idea now who the player is. Doesn't tell us anything necessarily about who the individual is, but certainly on a baseball standpoint, we're going to know, hey, have you progressed? Have you gotten bigger,
Mm,
faster, stronger? All those types of things, because we need to continue that process at the
yeah.
college level. So really from there, then it just becomes, hey, are we then a fit, after kind of checking those things. So they're
Yeah.
a huge help to us, in terms of the events, like, PBR specifically. They run a lot of state games. We can see a lot of kids in a short amount of time. So
Yeah.
if I can take 2 days out of my schedule to go to a state games, I'm probably going to do that. So are a lot of
Mm-hmm.
other schools.
Yeah.
So it's just a lot of, where can I get the exposure, and where can my metrics be tracked to?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's a big, big appeal.
Yeah.
So it just kind of depends again, but I would say there anything you can do to either put yourself out there more or show progress, that's going to be huge.
Awesome. Awesome. Good stuff. Now, here's a great question. So, what would be advice for a parent who's, man, our son is like, he's really busy. He's busy with, school, sports, other extracurriculars, and it's like really hard to find that time as far as like investing in recruiting. So, maybe in reaching out to coaches and doing some of those things. What would be some of your advice there for them as far as like how maybe they need to maybe prioritize the recruiting activities, and if it gets kind of put behind a little bit, how that might affect, maybe their recruiting process? Suggestions or just some advice for as a parent, how do we sort of like maybe reprioritize some things if recruiting is really important for us?
Yeah, I can only simplify it as it's just like baseball. You're going
Mm-hmm.
to get out of it what you put in. Unfortunately, it is one of those processes. It's not something that, hey, I'm going to put myself, on, Twitter and I'm going to get a million responses. Unfortunately, it's just not like
Yeah.
so if you are taking that time and for sure you want to play college baseball, because again, this comes down to it where it's not just something that you want to know how to just get through the process. There's a whole nother level to this that
Mm-hmm.
you have to understand that there's 4 years of development, there's 4 years of blood, sweat, and tears in a lot of ways, and that's not just on the player side. I promise you, I am crying and bleeding and sometimes all three, at times too. So there's just a lot of those ways that you're going to get out of it what you put in. And I
Mm-hmm.
think if you're going through it, again, you're also then going to get real-time experience. That For any single player going through this recruiting process, you're going to learn very quickly, hey, who's interested, who's not. It's also one of those processes too. The more you communicate, the more you put your name out there, you're also going to potentially find the right fit that way too. Just by getting responses, getting, even responses from, coaches. Hey, we're not a fit. We're not looking at your position for your grad class. It will kind of guide itself in a little bit, but you're not going to know that until you're
Yeah.
actually fully invested in it. And that's not to say we don't want a well-rounded individual. Excuse me for my language there, but you have to make sure that you are gung-ho about this process because
Yeah.
if I can simplify it in one way, college baseball is not for everybody. You absolutely have to love it. And again, that's not just from a parent standpoint. Your son has to love baseball enough to go through all of the things that we go through, and it's not easy. That's why it's such an accomplishment for guys to just survive all 4 years, not just for your overall life, but survive in the sense of like you're going to go through a lot. You're going to go through mental challenges. You're going to go through adjusting time management. Some of those skills that you're talking about are not necessarily going to go to waste, but you're gonna need a lot more than just kind of some things that you learn along the way. You're going to be put to the test in a lot of ways, and that's just the nature of not only the sport, but just when you're talking about being a student athlete, you have two full-time jobs.
Mm-hmm.
That's why when companies on the back end are looking for people to hire, they love student athletes because they know you can handle a lot, and you don't have to worry about who you're going to get, in that process. So that's again the best way I can put it.
No, that's great advice. I think it is important to prioritize it. How much do you really want it, right? I think that's also an indicator to the college coach, like how much do you want this by how much in time you're investing in, doing some of that outreach too. All right, everybody. I know we're over the hour. I don't want to keep Coach too long here either, but these are great. We got just a couple other questions, Coach, if you don't mind, if you're hanging
Sure.
around another couple minutes. But I did want to just real quick. I threw a link to a survey in the chat box. We're here to help you guys roster openings. We can do some evaluation. We're going to be able to reach out to coaches on your behalf. Contact info is on the screen, but if y'all could fill out that survey link I just threw in the chat box, let us know how great this conversation was. Well, I want to pass along to Coach Joe too after we get all your
Yeah, I need to
responses.
know,
Yeah,
please.
how great this conversation was, because I really appreciate his time tonight. All right, but Coach, we had a few really good questions come in here that I wanted to kind of get to. One was around. All right, I don't want to necessarily ask you to kind of like throw yourself under the bus here. But all right, so coach, we felt like we had some interest. Why would a coach like reach out, seem to express some interest, but then they don't end up following through on like getting a call scheduled like it seemed like they wanted to do, right? Like just kind of like how as a family from a college coach, how do we interpret that? What would be sort of your assessment of what might have happened in that scenario? Like just kind of give a little bit of some advice from the college coaches side of things. Like, man, it seemed like they were interested and wanted to call, and then seemed like they never set it up with us.
Yeah, Andy, you are always throwing me to the wolves here. But no, I will say, again, you have to also understand you are dealing with other human beings.
Mm-hmm.
There are things that come up. Life happens, just as everybody does. So, I try my best. Throughout the average summer, it's probably at least 1,500 kids that I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to get on the phone. Let alone all the other forms of communication. So mistakes are going to happen. I'm only one person. I'm a human. Like I said, I'm going to mess up. But please, don't take that as I'm not interested anymore. Nor with any coach. Again, if we're taking the time to also initially email you, if we're taking the time to set up that phone call, you're probably on our radar for a really, really good reason. So please follow up. I've even again made the simple mistake of like I've scheduled it in my phone on the wrong day. These things happen. Again, I don't, I try not to make these things happen. But just in the season of it, it's just a natural thing that always
Yeah.
occurs. And I will tell you, there's times that families can be disappointed about it. But I feel like I'm even shooting myself in the foot at times because I'm like, oh my gosh,
Mm-hmm.
that's a really good recruit. I did not mean to mess up. That's not a representation of Eastern University or
Mm-hmm.
myself. So it's just, one of those things that, please follow back up.
Yeah.
Because again, we're all, going to make mistakes through this process. I don't expect you guys to be perfect. I certainly don't understand or need to see you be perfect on the field all the time. I'm very upfront about that.
Yeah.
So just understand that I'm not always going to be perfect either.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna damn sure try that you are going
Yeah.
to get, your opportunity to be seen and heard.
Follow up, right? I love that. I mean, if there's a quick answer for it, hey, follow up, coach. Hey, sorry we missed you. Hopefully nothing happened, but man, we'd love to get on the phone. What's another good day in time, right? Don't necessarily assume the worst. Let's just maybe follow up, and maybe coach will get back, just like Coach Joe said. Oh man, I apologize. We had practice ran late or something and just didn't get to it. And yeah, let's reschedule. So, again, there was some clarification with that question that it was scheduled. So it was one of those scenarios like you described that maybe it was something that was missed. So your advice would be just follow up there then.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool. Coach, is it okay for a recruit to ask, like, hey, coach, are you still interested in me? Or like, where do I stand? Like, is it important for recruits to be kind of direct, if they want to know an answer to something?
Yeah, and again, even if it's just something like, hey, you may have gotten lost in the email inbox.
Mm-hmm.
There's also guys, just as a quick example, that I actually like how I have it set up, but part of me wishes I change it sometimes. Guys I might not necessarily like follow on Twitter, but they message me, and
Mm-hmm.
instead of my direct inbox, they're just kind of in a request inbox.
Ah, yep.
And there's just a lot of those reasons that guys won't necessarily get seen. And maybe they'll email me and like, hey, I messaged you on Twitter. I didn't, see a response. Well, great. Well, now I know A, where you came from, so I can check out.
Nope. Did we lose you, coach? Hopefully coming frozen here soon. It's frozen on my side. All right. Well, I think we might have lost Coach Joe. We'll see if he comes back on. We might have gotten a little frozen there. I was gonna wrap some things up there. I hope, and I think he just jumped out. We might get him back in here real quick just to kind of wrap it up. But if you all could hang around for another minute or two, otherwise feel free to jump out. I put that survey link in the chat box. If you all could fill that out. If Coach Joe jumps back in here, I'm gonna get him back in to kind of get a final wrap up here. But appreciate you all joining tonight. If you're out of here though, feel free to jump out. Have a great night. I hope this was helpful, man. And if we get Coach Joe in. Feel free to hang around for a minute. If I get him back in here, we'll try to get him back on. But otherwise, have a great night, and thank you all for joining. I'll send out a recording here in a little bit. All right, we got Coach Joe back on here real quick, though. I want to get him on to finish his thought, though. So if you all want to hang around, Coach, you back?
Yep. Sorry. Can you hear me?
I gotcha. Yes, it just
Yep.
kind of froze in the middle of your sentence, man. So I kind of said, hey, we're gonna get Joe on if anybody's jumping out, but you were, I don't even recall exactly where it was in the thought that it finished up there, but man, it was around what was it? It was around like kind of the interest, right, and kind of like understanding
Just
that.
genuine interest.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So again, any way that we can see that. I mean,
Yeah.
again, don't be afraid to reach out.
Yeah.
And I try to say this with our guys, over, even getting better. You have to over communicate. Because if I don't know what's going on with you,
Yeah.
no one will. So over communicate everything you possibly can.
Yeah.
So I apologize. Our
Oh,
power and Wi-Fi just went out, real
it's
quick. So,
hey,
gotta love technology and through on
we
my
got
hotspot. So.
we got a comment in the chat like good recovery, man. I mean, that was like quick. It was like a quick slip and right back to it, man. So awesome. All right.
Anything for you guys.
Hey, man, Coach, this has been phenomenal. I mean, you've been on longer than I really even wanted to keep you tonight. So I want to get you back to your Sunday evening. I'm sure you got to spend some time with your family here before practice picks up again tomorrow. But I appreciate the time, man. If you guys have any questions, I'm sure Coach Joe would love to interact with you. Reach out to him. Let him know if you have any questions about Eastern, of course, specifically. But if you guys are looking for any help, we can help you here, of course. Reach out to us. And definitely, I'm going to just throw that survey link in the chat box one more time. But Coach Joe, any other final 10-second thoughts before we get everybody out of here?
Copy and paste it. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions. It's just one of those things. Again, I love to help and teach as much as I possibly can. So, hey, if Eastern might be on your radar, reach out because you know what,
Yeah.
I love to go through this process. And it's just one of those things I take a lot of pride in. So, any help that I can be to anybody, I'm here for.
Awesome, Coach. I'm going to include that contact info in our follow-up email for the guys too. So appreciate the time, man. We'll definitely connect and we'll get you back on here again soon. Okay.
Awesome, Andy. I appreciate it.
Awesome, man. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see y'all soon. Y'all take care.